Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. As you're probably aware, Reikan, the Most Haunted Locations in Japan Volume 2, came out just a few short weeks ago. To celebrate, on this week's episode of Kowabana, we're going to be visiting some of the ghost spots featured in the book, as well as a selection of other haunted locations from around the country. If you're interested in learning more about them, you can pick up Reikan Volume 2 on Amazon right now. It's available in either ebook or paperback, and if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free right now as well. To start this week's episode, we're going to head into an abandoned hotel deep in the mountains. A group of young friends decide to visit it for a test of courage, but when they encounter some strange letters painted on the wall, in what appears to be blood, they soon realize that they may be in over their heads. Find out what happens in SOS. It's a sign used only in the utmost of emergencies. There's an abandoned hotel on the outskirts of M City, where I live, and it's famous around town as a ghost spot. During the summer of our 3rd grade of high school, myself and 4 friends visited that hotel for a test of courage. This abandoned building lies deep beyond the wild thickets. The building has turned black thanks to long years being exposed to the wind and rain, and just looking at it is enough to make you anxious. The entrance to the parking lot is locked with a chain and padlock. We stopped our bikes in front of it, and with a torch in hand, climbed over the chain and entered the hotel grounds. We shone our lights on the building, and all of the window glass had been broken. We trembled, fearing we might see figures that shouldn't be there, standing in the darkness of the empty windows. Inside the building, lumber and furniture lay strewn all over the floor. Random pictures of characters or something had been scrawled all over the walls, along with various writing and spray-painted graffiti. With each step we took, it echoed around the building. Even though it was humid outside, inside the building was as cold as a refrigerator. Everyone had been acting tough before we entered, but slowly the atmosphere changed, and now everyone walked slowly and carefully. As we walked down the 1st floor hall, we hit a dead end. I froze. All 5 of our torches fell upon some letters on the wall. SOS. The letters squirmed just like a snake, and they appeared to be written in bright red blood. Beneath those letters, a mountain of chairs, tables, and other timber piled high. "There's a door behind there," someone said. We shone our lights through the mountain of furniture, and in the gaps, we could see a wooden door behind it. I think everyone had the same idea. Someone was locked inside that room, and it was them who had written the SOS sign on the wall. Thinking about it closely, it was a stupid story, but at the time, that was what we all thought. "Let's move it." "Nah, we should get out of here." Everyone started arguing, and in the end it was decided that we'd move the mountain of furniture. I don't know if we were just curious or actually wanted to help, but at the time it felt like some unseen force was at work, pushing us along. There were 5 of us, so it only took about 10 minutes to clear enough away to see the door hidden behind it all. One of my friends reached out for the doorknob and then slowly opened the door. The moment he did, it was like a waterfall of dust fell inside the room, highlighted by our torches. It apparently hadn't been opened for a long, long time. The room was about 10 tatami mats large. All 4 walls were concrete with no windows. There were no signs of life, Not even a skeleton to greet us. Perhaps more surprisingly, there was nothing in the room at all. "Hey!" one of my friends screamed excitedly. He shone his torch towards the roof. My eyes followed the light, and there was a strange pattern on the ceiling. Numerous charms had been pasted all over it without a single gap, and they seemed to form a pattern. It was as though numerous crawling earthworms had formed the letters of a large red charm. Whatever it was, it had been designed to keep in something sinister. We shouldn't have gone in there. I don't know who did it first. It might have been me. Someone screamed, and then we all tore out of the building at full speed. We got on our bikes and pedaled down the hill without stopping. Once we got close to home, everyone went their separate ways. I think they all went home. We were exhausted after such a terrifying experience. I slept like the dead once I got back to my room and hit the bed. The following day was a Saturday, so when I woke up, I sent a message online to the guys from the night before. But by that night, not a single one of them had read it. Growing worried, I went to visit my friend who lived closest. Apparently, he hadn't yet come home. The moment I heard that, I was so shocked that I thought my heart was going to burst out of my chest. I went to visit the other guys' houses as well, but none of them had returned home either. Something must have happened on our way home the night before we split up. I thought about what to do, and then suddenly a message arrived online from everyone at once. SOS. That was it. As creepy as it was, I understood what it meant. No doubt about it, they were talking about that hotel we visited the night before. We had opened the room we shouldn't have opened, and we'd let out the sinister thing trapped in there. That was what I thought. I pedaled towards the hotel alone. Even though I knew something awful was going to happen, I couldn't just leave my friends like that. It was already past 9 p.m. I didn't have a torch with me, so I relied on the light from my phone, and I took the same path once I got inside the building. Alone, I was terrified beyond belief. It wasn't that hot, yet I was dripping with sweat, and with each step, it got worse. The SOS letters appeared on the wall before me in the light. The door that we had run from was still half open. I pushed it, and the creak echoed throughout the hotel. Summoning up all my courage, I stepped inside the room and shone the phone light before me. All four were there. They stood in the middle of the room, looking down at the ground. "Hey, are you okay?" I approached them and asked. There was no response. And then I realized something. It wasn't just the four of them in there. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There were countless children in the room with them, all standing the same way. Instinctively, I took a step back. If I could just reach the door. At that moment, it slammed shut. I panicked and ran for it, jiggling the doorknob, but it seemed to be locked and it wouldn't budge. Sensing something, I turned around, and all the children had turned to look in my direction. Their countless, hateful eyes twisted as they captured me in their sights, and I passed out. When I came back to, I was in the hotel's parking lot. My 4 friends looked down at me, worried. According to them, after we'd entered the room for the test of courage, I suddenly passed out. Did that mean everything that happened after? Us riding home, the message online, everyone disappearing. Had it all been a dream? It felt so fresh that I wasn't so sure. We got back on our bikes and put the abandoned hotel behind us. I turned around to take another look as we were leaving, and I saw a figure standing in the darkness of the empty window. That SOS sign had been a trap, and because we opened that sealed room, we'd let the evil thing out. We'd set it free. I returned home, hoping against hope that it really wasn't true. This next ghost spot you can find in Reikan Volume 2, and it's certainly one of the more interesting ones. All sorts of rumours surround the White House. And no, this doesn't refer to what you might be thinking. This White House, surprisingly called so because it's a house that's white, apparently has a terrible and tragic history behind it. Keep listening to hear one man's horrifying experience at the White House. There's an abandoned building known as the White House in the mountains near Kakata Beach, Niigata Prefecture. It's known countrywide as a famous ghost spot. There are all sorts of rumours surrounding the White House. It's said that it's the former holiday house of a diplomat who moved there with his sick daughter. When she started getting worse, they apparently locked her on the second floor, and when she got out, she grabbed a gun and killed everyone. My friend A-san, a taxi driver, experienced something terrifying when he visited the White House alone. It was through him that I learnt of the White House's existence. A-san's a 40-year-old man who lives in Niigata City. Apparently, he and others knew of the White House, but none of them thought it was a ghost spot as well. The rumours said that it was owned by the president of some construction company, and because he never used it, it had fallen into ruin. There was no incident like the one people generally spoke of, and yeah, there were bars on the second floor windows, but those were just for security. Apparently. As a taxi driver, he got the occasional passenger who said they wanted to visit the White House. Most of them were young kids who loved the occult and visiting haunted places, but there was one particular passenger who was a little strange. This passenger was a man in a suit. He looked like a businessman, perhaps a few years younger than A-san was. This man in the suit got in at Niigata Station, and his destination was the White House. A-san was curious why this businessman wanted to go there alone, but the mood didn't really strike him as appropriate to ask. 30 minutes later, they reached the road leading to the house. "Please stop here." A-san did as he was told and stopped the taxi. "I'll be back in 15 minutes, so please wait here." Having said that, the man handed A-san a 10,000 yen note. A-san didn't really want to wait near a ghost spot, but he was also curious about what the man was up to, so he agreed. The man got out and hurried up the path towards the house. A-san killed the time by reading a magazine. 15 minutes passed, then 30, but the man didn't return. Maybe something happened to him. He wanted to leave the man and go back, but that would be irresponsible of him, so A-san decided to go and see what the man was doing. It had suddenly gotten dark, so dark that he needed a torch to see. He didn't want to visit a ghost spot after dark, but he couldn't just leave the man behind. So on trembling legs, A-san made his way up towards the house. The house was white, just as the name stated, and the white walls of the abandoned building came into view under the torchlight. Thick shrubbery and trees surrounded it. He shone the torch carefully, trying to see if anything lurked in their depths. he could vaguely hear the sounds of cars passing on the highway nearby and the waves crashing on the beach below. He couldn't see the man anywhere outside the house. Trembling, he went to step inside. "Sir, are you okay?" His small voice echoed as he called out. He really didn't want to speak too loudly. He called out several times, but there was no response. There was nothing else he could do. He stepped fully into the house. He could only see under the light of the torch, meaning he could barely see at all. His heart pounded so loudly he could almost hear it, and his fear and anxiety doubled. It wasn't that hot, and yet he sweated. "Sir, are you okay?" Broken household goods littered the floor, and his footsteps echoed with each step he took. He grew even more frightened. He looked around the entirety of the first floor, but he couldn't see the man anywhere. He shone his light up the stairs to the second floor. The second floor was where the diplomat had locked his daughter up. He didn't believe the story, but still, he summoned up all his courage as he walked up the stairs, one by one. The second floor was a mess. "Sir, if you're here, please answer me." He didn't want to go any further, and yet his feet carried him further inside. It was like something was pulling him in, A-san later said of the incident. He stopped in front of a certain room. Even without entering, he could sense something ominous lingering inside that room. If that girl really had been confined on the second floor, then no doubt about it, this was the room. That was what A-san felt. He turned the torchlight into the room. Without thinking, he screamed. A person was standing in the middle of the room. It was the man he'd driven there. He had his back to him, and he stood peering through the bars covering the window. "Sir, are you okay?" A-san asked, stepping around to look at him. Again he screamed. The man's eyes had rolled into the back of his head, showing only the whites. He was unconscious, yet still standing. He was still standing because a small girl had her arms wrapped around his waist. She smiled up at A-san, the corners of her lips twitching, and then she disappeared. With his support gone, the man started to fall. A-san panicked and quickly grabbed him. Covered in sweat, A-san dragged the unconscious man out of the house. The little girl's ghost didn't appear again, but when he turned back to look at the house one more time, he saw some figures standing by the second floor window. Not one or two, but numerous figures, all looking down at him. He put the man in the back seat of the taxi, and then he pressed down on the accelerator, speeding away from the White House. The man came back to as he was driving. A-san told him what he'd seen in the house, and then the man started to tell his own story. The man apparently was a spirit medium, and his job had brought him to Niigata, so he wanted to drop by the famous haunted White House. "I had no idea it was that dangerous," he said with a sigh. The man was otherwise okay, so he dropped him back off at the station. "I have a job to keep, so I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell others what you saw," he said to A-san, making him promise to keep quiet. A few days later, A-san found the man's business blog. There was an article about the White House on it. The man had written about A-san's experience, only he hadn't mentioned that A-san saved him. He claimed that he received a request from A-san's family to save their occult-obsessed taxi-driving son. He was amazed at how bold the man was. After that, A-san refused any passengers who wanted to go to the White House. Just as he was about to finish telling me his story, he said the following. Apparently, the spirit medium I drove there passed away. He hung himself in his white mansion that he'd built in the mountains with the money he'd swindled from people over the years. Apparently, they call that place the White House too. I don't know whether it's true or not, but it might be related to what happened to us. You can also find this next location in Reikan Volume 2. Mikaeli Bridge is located in Kochi Prefecture, and there's a legend that if you cross the bridge, you mustn't look back. Mikaeli means exactly that, to look back, and there's a good reason as to why you shouldn't. Find out why in Mikaeli Bridge. There's a bridge in Kami City, Kochi Prefecture, by the name of Mikaeli Bridge. It's a small red bridge in the mountains, and it's said that you mustn't look over it when crossing at night. One famous story says that if you do, a woman with a fearsome expression on her face will be there, crawling towards you. This story happened to A-san, a university student who visited Mikaeli Bridge. One summer, A-san and 3 of his friends visited the bridge for a test of courage. A-san wasn't a big fan of scary stories or horror in general, but his friends invited him along, and so he went. When they arrived at the bridge in a friend's car, it was already past 1 a.m. They parked the car just in front of it. As soon as they got out, the coolness of the air in the summer heat surprised them. They figured it was because they were so high up in the mountains. A-san and his 3 friends started walking across the bridge. He regretted agreeing so easily to come along. He felt a pressure pushing against him just by standing on the bridge. Something seemed to be scratching at the base of his neck, making him uncomfortable. It was like stepping into another world. Cold sweat ran down his back. "All right, let's all turn around at the same time," his friend B said. "Ready? 1, 2... Nobody turned around. "Come on, you gotta turn around, guys," B said, but his hands and legs were shaking. A-san's entire body refused to turn around. The other 3 seemed to feel the same way. "Oh yeah," C said. He proposed they use their smartphones to see what was behind them, rather than physically turning around. Everyone agreed it was a great idea. C took his phone out immediately and put the camera into video mode, turning it to film what was behind them. The 4 friends started to retreat backwards as he filmed. As long as they were standing on the bridge, they couldn't turn around. Finally, they got back to the car. A few short meters had felt like much more. After climbing into the car, they finally calmed down. "Let's watch the video." Sitting in the back seat, C held his phone out so everyone could see it, and pressed play on the video he'd just taken at the bridge. The red bridge came into view in the darkness. The view retreated slowly with the men. They watched it until the end, but nothing strange appeared. "I guess nothing really happens if you turn around then," B said nonchalantly from the passenger's seat, now that they knew they were safe. The friends stopped to eat ramen on the way home, and then went their separate ways. But then, 2 days later, C-san went to visit A-san. He hadn't heard from B-san or D-san in the last 2 days, and he hadn't been able to get into contact with them either. Worried, the pair went to visit B-san's apartment. They knocked on the front door, but there was no answer. They could hear a faint voice inside, however. A-san pressed his ear to the door. It sounded like B-san was talking to someone. He pressed his ear even closer. "You mustn't turn around. You mustn't turn around." That was what it sounded like. After that, they went to visit D-san at his dorm. He was asleep and looked unwell. Just like B-san, every now and then he muttered, "You mustn't turn around. You mustn't turn around." The two started to wonder if this was happening because they all went to visit Mikaeri Bridge. Why this was only happening to B-san and D-san, however, they didn't know. Maybe it's because they were sitting in the front seats. They had to turn around to see the video, so maybe that was it. They turned around to see the bridge, so maybe the bridge's curse got them that way. Thinking about it, A-san couldn't help but agree. The only difference between them was that B-san and D-san had turned around to watch the video in the car. Both men were hospitalized after that, but that's all we know. It's not clear whether A-san and C-san were in the clear either. If you happen to come across a video of Mikaeri Bridge on the internet, make sure you don't turn around to watch it. If you've read Aokigahara, The Truth Behind Japan's Suicide Forest, you may pick up what's going on in this next story before the big reveal. A young photographer visits Enoshima, off the coast of Kanagawa Prefecture, to take some photos, but happens to run into an old friend there. An old friend who's dead. What exactly is he doing there? Find out in Enoshima. Enoshima is an island in Kanagawa Prefecture, along the Shonan coast. It's connected to the coast via Enoshima Ohashi Bridge, and because it's so easy to reach, it's a popular tourist destination. It was also chosen as the opening location for sailing in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Souvenir shops line the path leading to Enoshima Shrine, and at the top of the mountain, you'll find Enoshima Samuel Cocking Garden, as well as a lighthouse with great night views. The island is also famous for a grotto that was used as a training grounds for an ancient religion, and there are all sorts of anecdotes about the monks who trained there. This scary story is about my experience at Enoshima Island. I enjoy photography, and I often go on trips alone to take photos. When I was in the second grade of university, I stopped by Enoshima while I was on a trip. It's a small island, but it was swarming with tourists, plus there were lots of well-known spots to take scenic pictures. I went around the island once, and then stopped by a cafe to check the photos I'd taken. My eyes suddenly stopped on one photo in particular. It was a photo I'd taken in front of the shrine gate. Numerous tourists milled in front of it, but my eyes fell upon one man. It was someone who shouldn't have been there. My classmate, who died 3 years earlier. No doubt about it, it was him. Or was it just someone who really looked like him? No, it couldn't be. He had killed himself in the second grade of high school. He left behind a note before visiting the infamous Sea of Trees. They still hadn't found his body, but everyone knew that he was dead. Even his family had given up hope. As far as I knew, he wasn't the victim of any bullying, nor was he under stress because of tests. In my opinion, he simply chose death because he couldn't find a reason to keep on living. So chances of him being actually alive were low. Had I captured a ghost on film? But why at Enoshima? We weren't from here. The area was nothing to us. Nothing made sense. I went around the island again taking photos. I had planned to leave, but I wondered whether I might run into my former classmate again. Even if I did, it wasn't like I had anything I wanted to say to him. Not like I wanted to ask him what he was doing there or anything like that. I didn't understand what I was doing either. The grotto used by monks was at the edge of the island. Again, I saw my former classmate there. I chased after him, further and further inside. It was damp and clammy, and water ran down the walls in parts. Something dripped nearby. I continued further in, careful not to slip. His ghost stepped over the no entry sign and went further into the cave. "Hey!" I called out. His ghost stopped in his tracks and turned around. His mouth moved, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I tried to read his lips. Do, wa, oo. Do you, wa, oo. Do you want to die too? Shocked, I took a step back. Suddenly there was a loud bang, and a piece of rock the size of a rugby ball suddenly fell before my eyes. If I hadn't taken a step back, it would have hit me right on the head. When my eyes went back to the rock, my classmate had disappeared. A few days later, I was investigating Enoshima when I discovered a legend that states the grotto in Enoshima is connected to Fujiyana Cave in Aokigahara. So, that was how my dead classmate was no doubt able to appear there. I wonder if he's still wandering around in the area connecting Enoshima and the Sea of Trees. Abandoned buildings are all over Japan, and they're a staple of ghost spots. The man in this next story loves visiting them to take photos, and usually he doesn't run into trouble, but this time he encounters something he can't quite explain. Find out what in The Haikyo Maniac. I love taking photos of abandoned buildings, and when I get the chance, I head out to check them by myself. But a lot of these places come with scary stories attached, and I've experienced all sorts of terrifying things myself. This story is about one of those times. On this day, I went to visit an abandoned hotel in Wai Prefecture. This hotel in the mountains had been abandoned for years, so I went out to take some photos. It wasn't for a test of courage or anything, so I went during the daytime. A road leading to the hotel split off from the main road, and after following it for about 5 minutes, I reached the hotel remains. It was a 5-story building with more than 50 rooms inside. It looked like it had been built during the bubble, and then abandoned when it was no longer profitable. The walls were black, and there was barely any window glass left. I took photos all over the building. The vitality of the overgrowing vines seemed to compete with the degeneration of the empty building. Abandoned buildings inevitably lead to death. As I pressed the shutter button, the phrase rang out over and over in my mind. I pressed through the vines that had grown unbidden over the years, and then I reached the car porch by the entrance. After that, I entered the lobby. It was in even worse condition than I imagined. Dried leaves carpeted the ground, and broken pieces of equipment lay everywhere. It felt like stepping into some historic ruins. As I took photos in the lobby, I heard a woman's laughter coming from the upper floors. Perhaps I wasn't the only person there taking photos. There are, oddly, a lot of people who enjoy abandoned buildings out there, and we often run into each other. Or perhaps it was someone out doing a test of courage during the day. I hadn't looked too hard into the place before I arrived, but maybe it was a famous ghost spot too. If I knew something was haunted beforehand, then I might hesitate to go. I made it a thing not to check before I went. I heard the young woman's laughter again. This time it was coming from the stairs. I didn't really want to run into anyone else, so I decided to go check the first floor. I entered a large room that had no doubt once been a restaurant. Broken tables lay all over the floor. Again, I heard the woman's laughter, this time coming from the kitchen in the back of the restaurant. Odd. Just before it had come from the top of the stairs. There was no way she'd gotten in front of me in that time. Plus there was something odd about the way she laughed. There was no change to it. People's laughs changed as people spoke. They were slightly different each time. Yet this woman's laugh was like it had been recorded on tape, and it was exactly the same every time. Maybe this was a dangerous place. When I turned around to leave, I heard the laugh coming from 2 or 3 meters behind me. It had gotten closer in an instant. It couldn't have been the work of a human. I ran. I ran back the way I'd come. I turned around as I ran and I realized that the laughter was coming from thin air. My heart screamed, but I continued running. The laughter chased me from behind. It seemed to be getting closer. When I reached the lobby, the laughter was right in front of me. It's gonna catch me, I thought, but then I heard it coming from in front instead. It had gone around me. Scared, I held my head in my hands and crouched. Perhaps it was an instinctive reaction to protect myself. The laugh suddenly stopped. For a solid minute, nothing happened. Was everything okay now? I lifted my head, and a scream I didn't recognize as my own escaped my throat. Countless ashy faces surrounded me, looking down at me. Young and old, men and women alike. All of them had black gaping holes where their eyes should have been. When I came back to, I was in the hospital. A group of kids out for a test of courage apparently found me passed out. What on earth were those things that I saw? Even now, I still don't know. I'm terrified that something might be in the photos I took, so I still haven't developed those either. For our last story this week, we're heading to a ghost spot you can find in Reikan Volume 1. This bridge also has a tragic history, and as one young man is about to find out, may actively be calling more people towards it. Find out what's going on in Nijino Bridge. This happened the other day, when 4 of us guys went fishing. We visited a mountain stream in Yamanashi Prefecture. Then we dropped by a hot spring, did a little sightseeing, and then made our way home. I think it must have been after 11 p.m. by the time we got back on the highway, heading towards Tokyo. The 4 of us live in Hiratsuka City, Kanagawa Prefecture. Everything was smooth on the Chuo Expressway until we reached the turnoff for the Kenno Expressway, but unfortunately, there was an accident just past Otsuki, so traffic was backed up. There was nothing else we could do, so we got off at the Otsuki interchange to take the long way back. The road twisted and turned as the navigation took us through the mountains. Lonely roads with little traffic went on and on. Everyone was exhausted, so they said little, and next thing I knew, the other 3 were asleep. Finally, I found a sign pointing us towards Atsuki and Isehara, so I turned right onto Route 64 and climbed a narrow mountain road only wide enough to fit a single car. A mist slowly started to roll in, and I regretted getting off the highway when suddenly in front of the car cleared up. A bridge sprawled out into the darkness. The sign said Nijino Bridge. Crap, I thought. Nijino Bridge crosses the Miyagase Dam, and it's a ghost spot famous for suicides as well. A large fence had been erected on both sides of the bridge to stop people from jumping over, and crossing over it at this time of night was nothing if not foolish. I could have avoided it if I'd known, but I'd followed the car navigation and so we'd ended up here. The other three continued to sleep, blissfully unaware we'd just arrived at such a terrifying place. I wanted to wake them, but more than that, I just wanted to cross over the dam and get out of there. I stepped on the accelerator and entered the bridge. There were no other cars around. I felt like something might jump out of the mist towards us, and I couldn't get the idea out of my head. About halfway across the bridge, a woman standing by the fence appeared in the car headlights. No way! Was she about to jump? I almost slammed on the brakes, but something told me not to get involved, so we slowly drove past her. I quickly glanced at her out the side of my eye, and she stood frozen, facing the fence, her back to us. Even though it was winter, she was wearing a t-shirt. There was definitely something strange going on. After we'd passed her, I felt bad for ignoring her, so I looked in the rearview mirror. But she was gone. I knew it. A chill ran down my spine and I broke out in goosebumps. We had to get away from there as quickly as possible. Instinctively, I pressed down on the accelerator and, once we were off the bridge, I stopped and looked in the rearview mirror again. Mist completely covered the bridge, so I was unable to see anything. I couldn't stop trembling in both fear and excitement at having seen a ghost. I went to wake the others up, but then I heard them mumbling something. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. It was like they were chanting in unison. I hit the three of them and they woke up. They were annoyed, but they stopped chanting. After that, I never wanted to go back to Miyagase Dam again, but the other day, we were on our way back from a memorial service for one of our relatives when, I don't know why, my father took us towards Nijino Bridge. I asked if he could take us another way and he said he hadn't even intended to go that way in the first place. He had no idea why we were there. Maybe Nijino Bridge is one of those places that draws you in. I really don't recommend you approach it just out of curiosity. Don't forget, you can pick up your copy of Reikan, The Most Haunted Locations in Japan Volume 2, available now on Amazon and entirely free to read if you have Kindle Unlimited as well. You can also grab this month's 15 Days of Scarepril Marathon for as little as $1 over at patreon.com/TaraADevlin. Stay safe everyone, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.